Welcome to today's live chat. And today what I decided to do was something I've been writing about at the moment. So before I actually put the video together, video which I've finished writing, which I started doing in July, and it's now March. I thought it'd be a good thing to actually to discuss, as it's got something which is still very strongly in my mind. In July of last year, I went to Treblinka. I've been there many times, but this time I actually stayed there. And so because I went in the motorhome, I was able to, first night I was able to stay at a place called Brock, which is bang on the Bug River. And then I decided, I arrived at Treblinka, it was getting about 7:30 in the evening, and I tried to park once more along the Bug River. And this didn't prove to be possible because it was really sort of, the ground was rough, and whereas other people might have tried it, I was a bit concerned with the state of my vehicle. So I drove down, I actually parked the vehicle at the Treblinka station. Now, the station itself is no longer there, or rather, some of the buildings are there, but the station itself, as it was in the 1940s, indeed as it was when Cloud Landsman did Shore, it isn't there. And so a memorial's been put in its place, and I stayed there. There's a little car park, and I stayed there. The weather was 35 degrees, and because of this temperature, it was obviously a little bit uncomfortable for me, but one thing it brought very much home to me was the conditions which existed there during what was being called the Great Deportation, the large deportation of people from the Warsaw Ghetto from the 23rd of July 1942 onwards. And the conditions that the people who were brought there had to actually face. And it's that which I thought I'd actually talk about today, and indeed the one person who actually managed to escape from there. Now, in previous videos and things, I've often talked about Samuel Willenberg. He was an escapee. He was taken to Treblinka in October of 1942 from Opatów, and he escaped during the revolt which happened there on the 2nd of August 1943. But I'm not going to talk about him today. I'm not also going to talk about the gentleman who worked with the carpenter. I'm going to talk about somebody who was there for only 18 days, but he arrived at a time when there was utter chaos actually witnessed, and he came back with this story. Now, one thing which is really important as far as Treblinka is concerned, I think, or even the Warsaw Ghetto is concerned, is the fact that there was somebody called Emanuel Ringelblum. He was a historian, and he realized that as they were living through historic times, he wanted to leave a record. And so to leave a record, he got together around 30 plus people. Some people were there from time to time, and they took down notes about things which were actually happening. Now, also they collected things such as letters and other correspondence. Due to this, for example, we know a great deal. I mean, I would say this is the number one source, probably, for what happened at Chełm nad Nerem. And because we got these letters from people in the communities nearby, see that the populations of these towns are disappearing. They're being taken to this place, and then they're no longer around. So they're writing to their relatives in other places. Sometimes the relatives are no longer there, but these letters ended up in the hands of the archivists, and then the archivists hid them. When they realized that the Warsaw Ghetto was going to be eliminated completely, they hid them in 3 places. 2 of these archives, these temporary archives, were actually discovered in 1946 and in 1950. There wasn't, just because people remembered where they buried them. Unfortunately, the 3rd part of the archive, I was at a meeting around 2001 in Warsaw, and they were saying that, okay, the Chinese government might actually give permission to dig up part of its embassy, because it was thought that the 3rd part of this Ringelblum archive was hidden under the Chinese embassy, where the Chinese embassy is today. Obviously, it wasn't the Chinese embassy then. and they gave permission, but in 2005, unfortunately, they weren't able to find anything. But there still is things that might be found. In any case, the Ringelblum archive is an absolutely remarkable collection of documents which tells us what by people who realized, probably at the beginning when they started doing it, started collecting things, thinking they might write a book on it, but after a while they realized they weren't going to live, and that somebody else would have to write a book about it. And this is clearly in their mind. One of the things that anyway, so that they started to actually document were people who had first-hand experience in these death camps. The first one was somebody from a place called Izbica Kujawska, who he was in the Chełmno death camp. He escaped from there in the middle of January 1942. His first name Szlamek. He's not quite certain what his surname was. He also had a nom de guerre, an alias, but Szlamek was his first name, so we'll call him by that. And he escaped from Chełmno, and he did it by jumping out of a moving vehicle. And then when he was being transported between the chateau, where the people were actually, the prisoners were held, the work prisoners were held, and also the victims were normally killed there, and the place where the bodies were actually buried. And he had a journey which took him to Warsaw, and in Warsaw he gave an account of what happened. Then he went to Zamość. Unfortunately, he was then caught up once more by the Nazis, and from there he was deported to Bełżec's death camp, and he was murdered around the third week of April 1942. The person I'm going to talk about here is somebody who's called known in history as Abraham Shepitzky. He his real name actually was Yakov Shepitzky, but they're using false names. They kept the same surname, but to try and hide where they were, which is, I think, something understandable. He was born in 1915 in a place called Prashka, which was on the border between Russia and Germany. Things by 1915, the First World War was on, so he wasn't born in Russian-occupied Poland. He was born in German-occupied Poland, and his parents. So he grew up there, but his parents in 1928 moved to Gdansk, and so he was living there. Where he learned to be a tailor in 1938. Now, people would lose their Polish nationality if they spent more than 5 years out of the country. That was the problem which started Kristallnacht. And so he actually returned in 1938 to do military service in Poland. So he'd hang on to his Polish citizenship, and it wasn't forced to take citizenship of the Free City of Danzig. And when the war started, he was in the army. He was taken prisoner, held in a POW camp near Lublin, and in March of 1940 escaped. And then he made his way back to Warsaw, and in Warsaw he worked in a sweets factory, so artificial honey and sweets. Now, he was caught up in the deportations which happened in the Great Deportation. So he went to work as normal one day in August 1942, and in the evening the SS surrounded the place where he was working. This makes very clear it was the SS, not Jewish police. And then they gathered everybody together, and they took them to the Umschlagplatz in Ulica Stawki, and from there he was sent to Treblinka. Now, when he arrived there, so he's described his journey, and he's got these pretty horrific things which happened as well. And one thing actually I can read to you is his account of what it was like at Treblinka station, which seemed to absolutely horrendous conditions which actually were there. Now, when I was there, I've got a video when I actually read something out which was on one of the boards. I think it was somebody from Washitsa, which was deported to Treblinka in August of 1942, and it was a sort of a respectable, to use that word, person, and he. But because of the heat in the van, in the wagon, the lack of water, in this sensation of becoming quite crazy. In these circumstances, he lost his mind completely, and he said he was running around absolutely naked and in it. And I'll read something that he said. So he was taken there. What had happened is the trains would go to Treblinka station, and then they would peel off maybe 20, 18 wagons, just so enough that had enough people that they could kill in one go. Then they would take them to the station while the others were waiting. But because they were ordering far too many trains, more trains than they could kill, people they could kill, then so the people were waiting, not just at Treblinka, I mean at other places as well. There was just trains just lying around. There were times when the trains was hardly anybody was left alive. So you had 2,000 people on a train, say, and there's hardly anybody actually there. So I'll answer the questions when I sort of towards the end, because otherwise I sort of lose my train of thought, if possible. So anyway, so he said this, that he's in the wagon, and so that then people, because they're desperate to live, and then they sort of lose. It becomes a battleground inside, so they're sort of fighting each other for the air, and also because of water. Now, he had some water on him, and he said that there was a mother there who had a small child, and he asked for water, and the son had fainted from thirst, and because he was trying to drink it, and he couldn't give her the cups, and then the woman who asked for the water bit him on the hand with all her strength to stop him drinking the water, but the bite didn't bother him at all. Now, sometime afterwards, this must have been 2-3 months later, when he was recounting this, having returned to the Warsaw ghetto, and the lady who was writing it all down, Rachel Auerbach, she said that he showed her his hand and he could still see the bite marks 4 months later. And so, but it was such this state that well, really bad situation. So anyway, the train goes into the station, and there's corpses all over the place, and so some of the people were sent off immediately to be killed, but he was actually kept back to deal with the corpses. So there were people there who were whose job it was to clean out the trains, get rid of the corpses and the body parts that were left in the train. I mean, so we've got this rather horrendous description of the fact that already the body parts are falling off, so people are sort of carrying out a leg or something like that, and those who were there looked to try and carry children's corpses out first because they were the lightest. He was then put onto a variety of other jobs in the camp, but all the time he describes these shootings which are taking place for no reason at all. There was this terror that existed there, and also things that they were forced to do, such as to empty the gas chambers and bury the bodies from there, and not only that, just or even to take the luggage which is there, and the luggage also got thrown into the pits. And so you've got the descriptions of that. Strangely enough, he also says something which was almost the same as in the Rudolf Rader, who was at Belzec, said is in the description that he gave of Belzec, which is almost the same. And I'll read this to you as well. This is how people were welcomed at the camp. A little later, an SS man comes to us and stands before us to make a speech. He spoke in a very cold-blooded way, occasionally sprinkling his speech with humor. "Have no fear," he repeated every few minutes. "Nothing will happen to you. The dead that were lying here, he postured at us, arrived like that. They died of a lack of air on the train. No one's guilty for that. Everyone will be treated well here. Everybody will be employed in his trade. Tailors and tailoring workshops, joiners and cabinet making, shoemakers as shoemakers. Everyone will get a job and food. Some people began to consider their trade, but they came close, and the German laughed and said in broad comradely fashion, felt their muscles, slapped them on the back. Yes, this is good. You're strong. Yeah, that's in your favor. And some people began to applaud. The majority of those who heard this speech really calmed down and once again began to believe that they were in a work camp. Sit quiet in an orderly fashion, and then they all did as he told them, as though they were in a classroom. And that's just before they're sent off to be killed. Now, so he gives lots and lots of descriptions of some of the things that happened to him. For example, he says there's a little girl came up to him, and the girl said to him this. He said, "What they're going to do to us? It's a difficult." It was difficult for me to tell her the truth. I hesitated for a minute and tried to answer in a manner that would reassure her. My behavior, however, filled the girl with even more fear, and then even more quickly she shouted to me, "You have to tell me what they're going to do to us. Perhaps I can save myself." I had no choice, and I answered with one word: scrap. They're going to scrap you. The girl left me and began to run through the barracks just like a mouse caught in a mousetrap. She looked to find loose planks, windows, doors, ran backwards and forwards, until it was her turn to hand over her clothes, and an SS man began to beat her with a whip and make her strip naked. He gives the descriptions of what happened when people were waiting to die. Now, I lived with Toivo Blatt, who escaped from Sobibor. I knew several people who were in Sobibor. Indeed, you might have seen videos I've done with the reunions. And the description of what actually happened to people when they were put into these the tube and then into the gas chambers, and how the noise from the gas chamber, how it actually was. And this is all things which you can also see in this one as well. So his own reaction was this. He said, "I can't allow myself to think about this. I had neither the time nor the head for it. I couldn't take it to my heart. Something in me always warned me, steel yourself, don't let yourself fall apart." From descriptions I've read, many people had a complete nervous breakdown, unaware of what was happening around them. You often see people say this, is that they didn't have a clue what was going on around them, because after the shock of the journey and then the arrival at this place, with all the for example, clothing and even bodies lying around, this is an absolute nightmarish scene of hell. It's unfathomable that something like that might actually happen. And so I think that people just they lost their minds. Now later, when they introduced a certain amount of order, for example, when Toivo ended up in Sobibor, and he said that when they arrived, it looked so nice. There was flower beds. It was like houses. It looked like bungalows. It looked like a sort of a holiday. Well, I mean, not a holiday camp, but it looked like a camp. It looked very pleasant. But not at this stage in Treblinka. It wasn't like that at all. And anyway, there is one incident which is quite famous. I'm trying to get in my head precisely what actually happened on this, because it's something which I've known about for some time, but I'm trying to explain it. On the 11th of September 1942, there was an act of resistance by somebody called Mayor Berliner. He was from Argentina. He was born in 1900, and he had the misfortune to be in Warsaw when the war started. He realized that his family had all been murdered, and he was doing the same jobs as the other people, the slaves who were there. Anyway, he had a knife from somewhere, and there was an SS Unterscharführer called Max Biala, and he stabbed Max Biala during a selection. Anyway, this led initial was the shock that somebody actually attacked someone like this. And it seems that even people who tried to, and even succeeded in breaking out of part of the camp, because okay, they were shot at. Christian Wirt was in Treblinka at the time, and he ordered that nobody should be fed or watered for 3 days in punishment. Following day, Kurt Franz then ordered 10 people to be killed, and the following day they did a selection for 60 to 80 people. It's not clear how many people were shot as a result. In any case, after seeing these pits of the dead and other things, Shepitzky said he needed to get out, but he did admire the way in which Mayor Berliner had died and what he did. Anyway, so there's a film called For Those I Loved, or something like that, made around 1988, something like that. I can't remember his name now, Martin something. He claimed to have been in Treblinka. It was a 3-part made-for-TV thing. I saw around, no, maybe it was wrong. I can't quite remember when it was, 88, 1990, something like that. Anyway, this person, Martin, whose name I've forgotten, wasn't actually in Treblinka. He sort of got this from somewhere, the story, but he escaped from Treblinka by getting inside claimed he escaped from by getting inside of a wagon was loading clothes. And in this case, Abraham Shepitzky did get into the wagon, which had been loaded with clothes, and he broke out after about 3 or 4 kilometers. And then he made his way back slowly to Warsaw, but initially stopped at a place called Stoczek. Stoczek, if you look at the map, is located approximately 20 kilometers to the southwest of Treblinka. And whilst there, he came across other people who had escaped. He wasn't the first person to escape. There were others. Indeed, the Oneg Shabbat has records of other escapees who escaped previously from Treblinka, and there they were able to warn people in Stoczek about what was going on. And in Stoczek on the 22nd of September 1942, the ghetto was liquidated. This was done unusually it was done by the German police, not the SS, and they also used the Polish police, and strangely they also used the voluntary fire brigade as well. People were then forced marched to a place which is about 15 kilometers from there, and from that place they were taken to Treblinka by rail, but possibly, and I'm just theorizing here, possibly because they'd been warned. There was a mass breakout. There was an attempted mass breakout from one of the wagons. I don't know if anybody survived. I know of no one who survived, but that attempt was made on that journey. From Stoczek, after witnessing this, he made his way back to Warsaw. He got there maybe 5-6 days later. It's not clear, but it was still September by the time he got there. By this time, the Great Deportation from Warsaw had ended. So from maybe 300,000 people in the ghetto, there were now only 60,000 in the ghetto. Officially, it was 30,000. The second half of the people weren't even supposed to be there. They were called wild, and that means they weren't supposed to be there. They didn't have the paperwork. They couldn't get a ration card, so they couldn't eat. Perhaps finding accommodation wouldn't have been so difficult, because I'm sure by this time that was available. But for food, that would have been a far bigger problem. Anyway, once he got back into, I don't think that getting into the ghettos once you're sort of agile and you what you're doing, particularly at this stage, wasn't such a major problem. You do see people who are couriers between ghettos, for example, moving from one ghetto from Częstochowa, for example, to Vilna, to Warsaw, to Lublin, etc., moving around. So I think getting in wasn't such so difficult. Now, he must have known of Oneg Shabbat, or maybe he knew it because he knew Rachel Auerbach, who was working there. He told her his story because they'd been neighbors previously, and that she wrote it all down. And thanks to her, because she had also this, she's got such nice, clear writing. It's very easy. At least the Polish bit is very, very easy to read. It's so it's really super clear. Most of it was written down in Yiddish, but even so, it's nice big letters. So it's not difficult as usually is with handwriting. And she wrote down his account, and it took up 3 notebooks. Now, most of these accounts were just, for example, the previous one had been 10 pages. His is very long. Now, on the 18th of January 1943, he joined. There was an attempt by the Nazis to liquidate everybody from the ghetto in Warsaw, and this attempt failed. It met with armed resistance. Indeed, they did manage to get around 6,000 people. Most of them were people who worked for the ghetto administration, above all the police. There was street fighting, and so the Nazis backed off. They decided it wasn't worth the bother. They'd come back with more people. On the 19th of April 1943, some 4,000 soldiers were used to try and to enter the ghetto and deport the remaining population. This time they met with serious armed resistance as well. Now, at the time of the January attempted deportation, Abraham Shepitzky joined the Jewish Fighting Organization. On the 22nd of April 1943, he was wounded, and the wound proved fatal, and he died as a result. So he didn't actually live to see the end of the war. But anyway, there's a book, and the book is called I can't remember the first one I read, but there's a new one called Człowiek uciekł z Treblinka, A Man Escaped from Treblinka, which was published in 2017. I read this account ages ago, and I can't remember the name of the book now. But anyway, so that is really the unusual. Right, I'll have a look now at some. Sorry, I'm moving that there because it's easier for me to actually see the questions. So hello to everybody. Right, hello. And right, how many SS guards? Sorry, I think this is the question. Jason writes, how SS guards there were at Treblinka? So presumably, how many SS guards were there at Treblinka? Well, the SS itself, probably 25, no more. The Travniki. So the Travniki men were people who were recruited largely from ex-Soviet prisoners, Soviet prisoners of war, and they'd been held in various camps, above all in the home region, so what's now Poland. John Demjanjuk, for example, who became the famous one accused of being Ivan the Terrible. He clearly wasn't, but he was at Sobibor. He was actually recruited within the Soviets, inside the Soviet Union, but most of them were captured in 1941. But there were people, actually Travniki people, who were also from the Baltic states. There was even a small group from Poland. A friend of mine, Peter Black, he did research on this, and so he's got quite complete results of where people were from. I went to his speech on this, and I was so enthralled by his speech I forgot to video it. Anyway, so the amount of guards, this is the thing, this was all done by very small numbers of people. It was directed from an office in Lublin, a relatively small office, I would have to say, by a small number of people, but they did have access to others. So if they could call upon the order police or other police formations, even the Polish police, as in the case of Stoczek, if they absolutely needed to. Furthermore, the way it was done, it means that they could call on things like the Jewish police, and so because of the use of terror all the way down, and also people, for example, in the victim community. So if the Polish or Jewish, then they would feel they were part of this victim or potentially victim community. They would do it maybe to save themselves, and so there's that. Anyway, so the yeah, there was very few. There's very few people actually used to carry to actually destroy an ancient community counting millions of people. Anyway, so Carol writes compression asphyxiation. I don't know what that is. Hello to Mexico. Hello, Marco. And Jason asks, does anyone know what movie that tells the story of the Treblinka escape? There's that one. For those I loved. That's it. I don't know, somebody else. Yeah, okay. It was made for TV. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to look it up. I mean, the film itself was good. It's just historically inaccurate. This is the problem. And I read the book as well. But the thing, even with the book, I mean, maybe part of it are true, but the Treblinka bit isn't true. I remember they're sitting. I had it with my friend Michael Tregenza. So he and I sort of went through this very small description of Treblinka that he made in this book, and they're saying, "Well, okay, that's clearly not the that clearly didn't happen that way." Good, right? So thanks for watching. That was something I wanted to do. I've got a couple of other dice actually, because somebody wrote to me on one of my videos and asked if I had anything on Rudolf Rader. Rudolf Rader was somebody who escaped from Belzec, and whereas accounts of his life are including his own accounts sort of do change a bit, but I think in some ways what he was trying to do was to protect himself in the communist Poland, in the Soviet Union. So he came with other stories, but I might do a video on him. I might actually do something like this on him tomorrow. I think I'll do something on one of the perpetrators and a major perpetrator. So I've on the Hermann Höfler, the author of the Höfler telegram. How many SS guards were Auschwitz II? Yes, lots at Auschwitz. No, it's completely different. The Auschwitz staff at 3,000 people on hand, but bear in mind that there's it's different. It's coming under a different organization as far as Auschwitz is concerned. So whereas Operation Reinhardt was more secret. In Auschwitz, it wasn't. I mean, some of the things that happened there were supposed to be the secret, such as the killing of the Jewish population. But the thing is, with Auschwitz, it was a concentration camp within the system, and it was controlled by the inspector of concentration camps at Oranienburg, so Sachsenhausen. So that was slightly different. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.